This is an enabler of human creativity, and this is an opportunity to give smart, brilliant, creative people even more tools to be able to deliver that creativity and turn that creativity into really genuine commercial growth for businesses.
Today, we sit down with Rightmove CMO Matt Bushby for a true masterclass in modern marketing.
How do you think about segmentation? Do you think about it at that macro level of these big chunk of people, or do you think more about, no, it's personalised, I don't really care about that?
The reality, and this is a slightly fence-sitty answer, because you've got to think of it through both lenses, because
we explore how the fundamentals of great marketing haven't changed, but the landscape certainly has. From audience fragmentation to the rise of AI, Matt shares how marketers can balance timeless principles with constant transformation.
What has it changed or evolved your perspective on whether AI can help, hinder, or take over the creative process for marketers?
I genuinely don't believe that there is a world where this takes over from humans in terms of our ability to deliver creative solutions to problems.
We dive into AI, not as a replacement for creativity, but as an enabler. From building fully AI-generated campaigns to reshaping workflows.
That there's not a uniformity in the product pool of stock. So what is really, really important for a consumer is they can see the whole of the market, and then they can come in from the whole of the market.
If you want to understand where marketing is really heading and how to lead in that world, this one is for you. Don't miss out.
Hey Matt, amazing to have you on the show again.
Thank you for inviting me back. It's brilliant to be back. Thank you, Rishi. Thank you, Mark. Very excited.
Everything is changing, or a lot of the way that we do marketing is changing, although the fundamentals don't. Point us to some of the core transformations that you are seeing right now. Maybe one or two key things that are kind of front of your mind as to what you're looking at as you peer across the parapet.
I think maybe there's a couple of themes that might be interesting to dig into. One of which is around sort of audiences, fragmentation of audiences, how that's playing out, and actually how that presents opportunities but challenges to us as marketers as well. And also, for those that are operating a bingo card system, AI, and the impact that has on us, both in terms of the expectations that come from the boardroom, come from the CEO, but also in terms of the opportunities that I think it's opening up for us as well. If I start with the sort of the fragmentation side, I think it's been a really interesting journey for us. And again, one of the things that it's probably worth saying is, as a business, we've come from a very singular broadcast place. So when I first started, Rightmove was a really big TV advertiser, but really that was it. That was where all the investment went. And what we've tried to do is to think actually about, well, who are our audiences and where are they within their property journey, and how do we make sure that we're servicing them in the best possible way? So some of that comes down to the channels that we go to and actually the environments that we engage in, but also some of that comes down to the job that we need to do. So actually, if you're a 40-something homeowner that is looking for the next place, well, we can offer that sort of property search. We can shortcut you straight into that journey. You kind of know what you're doing. You've got that ability to get there. We'll let you check sort of mortgage rate, understand how much your home's worth, hold your hand through that process a little bit more. But if you're 21 and you're thinking, God, where the hell do I start? Actually, we take a very different approach. Offering you a stamp duty calculator is no good to man or beast. So actually, how do you think about where that audience is? And often that's an audience where you've got to help them along the journey. What is a mortgage? How does a mortgage work? How do you rent your first flat? What are some of the things that you need to avoid in the process? And that's been a big part of how we've built out our social comms, is saying, actually, we want to entertain, of course we do, but also we want to sort of educate and equip people with all of the things that are going to help them in their moment. So I think that idea of channel fragmentation has been, I think, interesting in terms of how we approach it in our marketing and our media planning, but actually has given us real opportunities to tell different stories in different environments and for us to be able to really support our customers and our audience. And I guess the second one was AI, and I suspect we'll talk about that a little bit as we come through, would be my guess. And that really is, I touched on it a second ago, I think as marketers we're under a huge amount of pressure to actually, how are we going to evolve our function? How are we going to add value to the business with AI being the enabler of that? And that's it's a really big challenge because there's this huge amount of unknowns. The idea of overhyped in the short term, underhyped in the long term, it just sort of holds true, I think. And so I think it's about us really stepping into that learning, understanding what the opportunities are, not being afraid to try stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, engaging with that and sort of trying to work out, well, for my particular business at this particular moment with the challenges that we have, what's the best way of us approaching this? So they're kind of a couple of the big things that I think are changing, and it's changing and engaging, maybe.
Not small things.
No, sorry, it started big.
The board expectations piece. So we obviously talk to a lot of CMOs, and 2 recurring conversations, the juggle between short and long term, and then the thought of CEOs who playing around with nano banana saying, oh, this marketing stuff's a right old easy lark, isn't it? How do you take a lot of cost out and be much better and quicker? So the gift of the impossible challenge from the CEO to the CMO around AI. What are you seeing on those 2 conversations, or maybe anything else specifically about what board expectations are?
Yeah, so I think to take the second one first, how is the CEO and the CMO in...
I'm not saying your CEO is on Nano Banana, by the way. But,
he is among many other tools. He is a huge advocate of AI and a huge champion of it. And we've made investments in it across the business to help us to support our partners, to give them the tools to help to grow their business, but also to enable our consumers and our people as well. So we really believe it can be a transformational technology. And I think we collectively believe that. I think when it comes to what we need to do as marketers, it comes down, I think, to being able to be really, really clear in where you see the opportunities and be really, really clear in what that process is going to look like in order to unearth those. And to your, I think one of the things for us, and we might touch on it a little bit later on, is we're not a big performance marketing function. So some of the early advantages that came in AI were around scaling up in performance marketing channels, in asset creation, in data manipulation, and so on. So, and again, we made that really clear from the start that we're not the early adopters, early winners in that space, but we're going to work across different things, and we've kind of laid out a roadmap and been really clear what it is that we're going to try to do, what the sort of strategic outcome is that we're trying to deliver, but then it's going to look quite small in the first instance. We're going to try stuff and it might work and it might not work. And I guess a couple of examples. One is we've produced 2 sort of fully Gen AI ads on social, so video ads for our mortgages proposition. And that was a real opportunity for us to learn about not just the technology, but also the fact that the production process just looks fundamentally different. And the concept of a storyboard kind of goes away when you can prompt the thing to basically build the story in front of you. So, but that took a huge, and it's not, and that part of the education process we went on with the business was, this isn't put 3 prompts into ChatGPT and it kicks it out. It's about the fact you need to create these rails, and then you need different models that do different things within these environments that help to build this. So actually, this is really hard, and this is where it went really wrong, and this was the bit where it worked, and some of the narrative was testing actually. Just because you can do it, should you do it? And sort of, so a lot of it was around sentiment and understanding that. So we've tried to map those things out, and we've tried to say, well, what are the business problems that we're trying to solve for? Another example might be we do a lot of content around education and training for estate agents, and some of it was pretty dry. Lots of written content, lots of booklets. We had a pretty big print bill at one point or another. Using a tool like Synthesia to actually turn that into avatars that offer a more personalised training experience that we couldn't scale if we had to film it and create it and build it in multiple different versions for multiple different subjects. But this kind of helped us to step into that. So there are a couple of examples where it has worked. I've got various examples. We had one particular video platform where we just couldn't control the eyebrows of the participants.
I mean, the devil is in the detail.
And it was, I mean, Richie, it would have been a nightmare. But it's,
Thank you very much for pointing that out.
You're absolutely welcome. But, so just stuff goes wrong. I think you've got to set a narrative and an expectation that this is where we're going for, but it's not going to be a linear path to get there, and actually we may never get there, and we may actually reset ourselves, but really explicitly, this is our plan and this is what we're going to go after.
Do you know some super examples and something really tangible for the audience to kind of take away and kind of play around with? You know, there's probably one of the big lofty questions that sit within the context of marketing today, which is all around creativity and the role of creativity in the context of AI, right? And so perhaps given some of the examples that you've been through around some of those social videos and using Synthesia and the like, has it changed or evolved your perspective on whether AI can help, hinder, or take over the creative process for marketers?
It's reinforced my perspective that this is an enabler of human creativity, and this is an opportunity to give smart, brilliant, creative people even more tools to be able to deliver that creativity and turn that creativity into really genuine commercial growth for businesses. And that's the bit that feels really exciting. I genuinely don't believe that there is a world where this takes over from humans in terms of its ability, in terms of our ability to deliver creative solutions to problems. We may come back, you may cut back to this hilariously in 10 years' time, and this turns out not to be the case. But I think what we're seeing, and this is not just true in marketing, I think this is true across the business, which is we see AI as a tool that enables people, because it takes stuff out of their way. It gives them the ability to move out some of those tasks that maybe were a bit more painful, a bit more manual, and actually gives you more space to be strategic, to be creative, and to think about those sort of bigger challenges. And that's the bit that's where I get really excited. So I think it's absolutely reinforced that view, which is it is hard because it's a new set of tools and they don't all quite live up to their billing all the time. So, but I think absolutely an enabler rather than a replacement.
Today's program is brought to you by two fantastic organizations. First up is Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform. Studio Space gives marketers complete control over their projects, from matching the right agency to your brief, to managing contracts and invoicing, and even tracking all of your spend data all in the one place. They take care of everything and it's totally hassle-free. They even guarantee the work. So check out Studio Space today. Our second sponsor is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity with a mission to make marketing a better place for everyone. They provide grants to help create a more equitable industry and support initiatives that really do drive diversity, inclusion, and create opportunity. The trust has been instrumental in leveling up the marketing skills across the board. And do take a look at their website for more information. Now, let's get on with the show.
You know, so I agree with you wholeheartedly on that notion of how humans and AI would scale that process. But it feels like to me there's a moment of ecosystem redesign, going from org redesign and kind of taking up the layer above. Because ultimately, if it becomes more efficient, taking away some of those other tasks, but indeed being able to create those synthetic videos that you did on social, I don't know how you did them, whether it was with third parties or indeed in-house. But it feels like there's a moment in time where actually the entire marketing ecosystem then maybe becomes more dominant. Maybe there's more in-housing as a consequence because people can feel more empowered to do more things versus sort of having an agency sort of on the side. I just wonder, what's your perspective on that evolving landscape of how we all sort of organize ourselves as an industry?
I think you touched on it there. You used the word evolving, and I think that's what we've got to do together. And if we take the piece of work that we were just talking about, that's one that we absolutely went into partnership with Neverland, our creative agency, and we said, look, this is what we want to do. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we want you to come on that journey with us, and we want you to lean into this process, and you're going to be learning, we're going to be learning, we're going to kind of have to do this. I think you in a lot of these relationships, you kind of go in because you want experts who can tell you exactly how something's going to work.
Yeah.
I think you've got to slightly change that framing and say you're going to go into this together not knowing exactly how it's going to work. And I think that requires trust on both sides of the relationship. In the client agency relationship doesn't always tolerate stuff not working. And so I think I see it as absolutely a partnership whereby we're going into these things together. If we're really clear what the goal is and we're really clear what we're trying to do, and then the process that we go through is open, I think we learn a ton. Hopefully we deliver something great at the end of it. But if we don't, we've kind of understood where the limitations were, where the opportunities were. But to go back to your question, I think it's critical that you can't try to force where the world is now and where the world is going into an old way of doing business or an old framework. And I use the example of the production process. That felt different, and we tried to push something new into something old, and it didn't really work. And I think everybody, probably most people getting frustrated with me, sort of trying to make it work. And then I think one of the production team at Neverland said, well, why don't we just sit down with your team and we'll just prompt it in. We'll sort of show you a video which looks something like it. That will act effectively as your storyboard. Then you sort of go from there. And I said, okay, that kind of works. And actually from that point onwards, it's that sense of how are we going to go at problems together and how we're going to engage. And I think it's on us as clients to make sure that we're framing that in the right way and we're really clear what it is that we want to do and we want to deliver. But it's also, I think, on agencies to think about how they are going to restructure their teams, their commercial models. There will be a lot of change, I believe that. And I think it's how do we approach this together and how do we start to build something that it should be an enabler, to go back to our previous conversation. So I think that's on all of us to be able to reset that ecosystem.
I think ecosystem reset is a good phrase around that, because anyway you cut it, there's now massive oversupply of marketing services. But I'm going to step out a sec for a bit of a macro observation, which is three odd years on since you were last on the show. It's and you're talking very strategically, very in control of your surroundings, and the story has evolved. So I want to talk a little bit about tenure, and because tenure of the CMO supposedly is the shortest in the board and decreasing, although there's mixed signals. But just how has this role grown for you? What has become more enjoyable? What are some of the things where, start to weigh heavier on your mind or enjoy less? Just like sort of the organic flow of 4 or 5 years now?
3.5.
3.5.
So how's it evolved and how's it sort of exceeded expectations, I guess? And so I think when I came in, a lot of what my job was to do was to reframe how marketing was seen in the business. Marketing, I think, was often seen as the telly ads and email team, and it was. I remember one of the first things I did. I got a board paper through, and I said, "Can you update the board paper?" I flicked through it, and I was like, "I can't find the bit." And I got to the page that said "costs" in massive letters. Flipped it over and there was marketing, and we were just a list of costs that were sent to the board on a monthly basis, and that was really the only interaction that the board had with marketing.
Wow.
And it wasn't a huge surprise that we were seen as the team that when you needed something you asked them to do it and they did it, and occasionally a TV ad popped out from somewhere. So I think a big part of my job then was to say, well, how do we play a role that is really going to drive genuine value for the business? It's very well and good us as marketers saying we should be in the boardroom and we should be sort of sitting around the table, but you've got to ask why. What's the value you're going to be able to deliver in that room, and why is it of value to have for them to have you there? So a big part of that for me was thinking, well, what is effectively the genesis of Rightmove? It's a really, really good case study in the power of brand at its simplest level, where we have 2.5 billion visits every year. We have an EBITDA margin of 70%, and that is basically how the business sits. It's ridiculous. But it's as a consequence of the strength of brand, because it's a business that has got itself into the FTSE 100 because it has embedded itself in culture and it's embedded itself in behaviour. So a big thing that has happened is that we, as I talked about it earlier on, we don't do performance marketing, and that's because when somebody wants to search for property, they go to Rightmove, and that is brand, and that is brand that has built as a consequence of positive experiences on the platform, finding the things that you wanted and having good outcomes. It's as a consequence, yes, of some of the marketing we do, but it's the broader experience that builds that trust and that sort of broader relationship that helps to drive all of those commercial outcomes that are so valuable. And so actually sort of framing that with the board, but also framing the fact that on the other side of our marketplace, which is our partners, how do we deliver really, really great value because of all of the consumers and leads and access that we can create there. But how do we do more than that? How do we help these guys run their businesses? And we do that by, we now offer qualifications. So we help people to train their staff. We offer sort of broader CPD training. We offer various different podcasts and webinars that help to either get across legislation, get across new trends, all these sorts of things. And that has tangible commercial outcomes because you become a really central part of how someone operates their business. And so what you start to understand is all of these different parts start to build one side of the marketplace where you're driving consumer engagement, consumer scale at efficiency. And then at the other side of the marketplace, you're building a bigger and a deeper role with your partners. You're delivering really tangible value that helps them to run their business. And all of that creates commercial gain as an organisation. So if you start to think about how you frame marketing in that sense, it then become you then invited in. You're pulled into the conversation a little bit more, and you're starting to do that. And we were quite tough on ourselves. We said, look, we need to prove to you that the stuff that we do works. So here's a marketing efficiency roadmap. Here's the touchstones that we're going to go through as we go through. So you'll see, like, first 6 months, it'll be a bit better than it is now, but it won't be market leading. But we are building towards this, and we will get to that. And actually, that for me has been a really interesting. And it was what I came in. It's my first role where I've sat on the exec. Within an organisation, having done regional leadership roles and various other things, but this is the first time sitting on a FTSE exec team, and that has been the real value that I've taken, is having all of those conversations that show the value of marketing, yes, but lots and lots of conversations that don't touch on marketing at all, and are actually, how do we operate this business? How do we build this business in the long run? How do we create shareholder value? How do we create really engaged staff and employees around the business? How do we do all of these things that make businesses successful? So I think part of my role was to come in and build the role of marketing in a positive way that genuinely added value. But then it was about actually what do I sort of see as my opportunity? And my opportunity is to really get under the skin of how the business works. But then it all comes full circle because I can reapply that back into actually the job that marketing needs to do and how we act as a growth engine. So it's not a job that's done yet by some way, and we're changing. Our business strategy is evolving. We're playing a bigger role both for consumers and for our partners. But we play it from a much stronger footing now, which I think is exciting.
Matt, that was a banging answer. That is why we had you back on. You had everything. Elevating marketing up into the board personally and through your outputs and impact. The balance of building a brand and how it obviates the need for performance marketing. How you've personally navigated into the right places and spaces. Masterclass. Great answer. The follow-up is strong brand. Not a Hoover, not synonymous with a category, but such a strong brand. What does LLM, AI-based search and agentic commerce mean? Do you, because the brand is so strong, does it not matter, or is it a risk factor because the LLMs may have different parameters for searching? With such a strong brand, what does the agentic mean?
We're spending a huge amount of time thinking about this and understanding this, and understanding currently how our brand appears within the LLMs, and understanding. And that changes every day as well. I think that's probably the thing to bear in mind as we monitor across all the various different LLMs. What we learnt on Monday then changes on Tuesday, which is kind of frustrating, but fascinating. And we're really understanding, well, what is it that drives that? I think a different currency, a different dynamic within the LLMs. It's less about finding, more about answering, and the ability as a brand to answer those questions and to not to completely change what you're doing, but to slightly rethink the way in which you turn up and the way in which you provide answers to questions is a really interesting challenge. And actually it's part of how we think about how we engage off the platform, with the likes of Reddit, with YouTube, with others, how we build our own content, how we engage with our product teams, how it's going to play out. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly how it's going to play out, but I think it's fascinating to see it, to learn it, to see how it's changing consumer behaviours, and we're really mirroring that in what we're doing on the platform. So really leaning into ways in which we can adopt elements of natural language search, ways in which we can use AI to, if you sort of see your doer-upper, your ultimate doer-upper house, how do you press the button? We've done it with a product called Style with AI. You press modern or country chic or whatever, and it changes what the images look like. So as those changing consumer behaviours exist off the platform, we want to make sure that there is a natural and clear transition for the consumer in, so it doesn't feel like you're coming from one environment and it clashes with the environment that you're arriving in. So it will be I will give you a different answer, I suspect, as we when we do this for the third time. But it's something that we're really trying to stay on top of, and I get so much value from talking to other CMOs, talking to people from other businesses, and people are great because they will say, I don't know, these are some of the things we're looking at, and some of the communities that you guys have set up have done just that. And it's the ability to ask the stupid question is something we should all embrace, because none of us really know. So it's really important to try to work out ways of building your experience and building your knowledge as well.
Richie's got the next question, but I'm just going to capture the point. We were literally talking this morning about, in this world of Agentic, as a person, as a business, as all you've got left is brand and community.
Yeah,
that's all that really is left as sort of strongholds, and that you've caught that square on. But sorry, Richie, back to you.
No, not at all. I mean, reflecting on what you're saying, and I so agree with you that it's sort of those peer network community builds are just so critically important as we all get through this together. Just the same way you talk to Neverland about we're all in this together and we're going to figure this out. There is a much wider thought in that about all of us as an industry need to come closer together to figure out these conundrums. When I think about Rightmove, and we talked about the LLM point, but moving from that, I think at the heart of everything is traffic, ultimately, right? Web traffic is kind of at the heart of the way that this operates, and therefore clicks and landing on the site. But in a world where, and the stat may not be quite right necessarily for your website, but certainly at a general level, 24% of all web traffic today is bots. Good bots, bad bots, and so on and so forth. That then certainly changes the interior of how you design for and what you are designing for in terms of that UX. And I just wondered, what's your purview and your perspective on the notion of how are you designing your UX platforms for an LLM sort of bot type of world, protecting your websites for that world as well, because that impacts all of e-commerce in effect, and then designing sort of more personalized journeys for humans. It's a big question with a few dimensions to it. But I wondered if there's a way that you can piece it together.
It comes back, I think, to the fact that we're still learning how the various different bots, because there are more than one OpenAI bot, for example. Yeah. So there's the training bots, there's there's traffic bots, etc. So they interact in different ways, and you have to understand the different ways in which they crawl the content. I think your point is right about traffic, but I think traffic is no good unless it is quality, high intent traffic. And so at the heart of our model is making sure that we drive outcomes for our partners. So from a UX point of view, that's absolutely the focus. From a consumer point of view, that's absolutely the focus. It is how do we get people and how do we give people the opportunity to get to the places that they need to get to in the quickest, most efficient way possible. And some of that is around, and we talked about it a little bit earlier on, but different needs of different audience groups. So you might be coming on because you want to rent a flat, or you want to extend your lease. You might be coming on because you want to get a mortgage. You might be coming on because you want to understand the value of your home. As much as we can, we want to try to use the data signals that we've got to help to personalize that experience for you. So you're coming in with a range of different intents. We don't want to put everything in front of you all in one go, because if you are looking to rent a flat, you really don't need to know about mortgage rates. So that concept of personalisation becomes really important. I think as we're thinking about what that means in an LLM world, I think some of that is around thinking about content, about page structures. I think some of it is coming back to the fact that it's the same but different from the world we learned in SEO, and it's sort of there are some similarities to a world 15, 20 years ago where all of this was sort of how do we do, and it's all settled and it became a lot more systematic and structured as we went through. And I kind of go back to that world a little bit, which was, okay, well, we're going to try to think of different ways in which we can structure our pages, structure our site, structure our platform in such a way that we are optimizing for the LLMs. But our primary goal is always, how do we make sure the consumer experience is optimal, and how do we make sure that there can't be a sacrifice that we make with the consumer experience. Otherwise, we sacrifice the business, we sacrifice the outcomes that we deliver for our partners. So
it's really interesting. I'm going to turn a little bit related to the conversation. I was on Instagram a couple of days ago and scrolling through, and I saw this sort of advert where this person said, look, there's no need for any of your travel requirements, the typical Skyscanner type of thing. It's all sort of coming to an end, because actually all you need to do is a couple of prompts into your LLM, and all of a sudden you're getting far cheaper, better deals using your LLM than you ever would on a marketplace. You know where this is going. The exponential threat, therefore, of a marketplace disintermediation based on an LLM doing the categorization and search and being an engine for a consumer finding the next big thing or the thing that they're looking for. I wonder, and I'm not sure necessarily it's related to property search, because I think it may be a different beast. But certainly there's some marketplaces out there that may certainly in low value kind of purchase areas, which may actually then ultimately get replaced by an LLM. Is that kind of, I don't know how you see that and your perspective on it.
There's not a uniformity in the product or the stock. So what is really, really important for a consumer is they can see the whole of the market, and then they can come in from the whole of the market. So that's where it's really important for us that we build those tools that help them to do that in the platforms. But you never want to miss out. That's the thing. When you're searching for a home, the really key thing for you is that no stone unturned, that you saw everything. Yeah. And that's one of our big USPs as a brand at Rightmove, is that we have the most properties in the UK on our platform. And that's reassuring for a consumer because they can see the market. And that need doesn't go away. That stays there. And it becomes about how do you provide the tools? How do you lean into natural language search? How do you lean into all of those different toolkits to help the consumer to then refine that and to find the things that they want to? So the method of search will adapt and will evolve, but the power of seeing it all in one place and the power of the brand in delivering that for you is critical. So that really is where our focus is. Our focus is on building those incredible consumer experiences that help the consumer to find what they're looking for, and to provide our partners with the tools to help them to make sure that they can deliver those experiences as efficiently as they possibly can to the consumer.
Love it.
Okay, so I've got a slightly superficial question, but it grows into a proper question. our kids are grown up. If anything, we're going to downsize. We have no intention of moving, certainly not buying anything bigger. But my wife will spend hours looking at like dream properties or even in our area, where we might go, which we're never going to do. So she will be a segment, I guess. So the question is about segmentation. So and it has two parts. You know, what do you call the segment my wife's in? So just so I can label it. But more generally, how do you think about segmentation? Do you think about it at that macro level of these big chunk of people, or do you think more about no, it's personalised. I don't really care about that.
The reality, and this is a slightly fence city answer, because you've got to think of it through both lenses. Because if I take it back to a personal experience of where when we made our last move, we'd got plan permission had just come through to extend the house. It come through that morning, and my wife WhatsApped me and said, "I found this amazing place." And I said, "Well, that's all very well and good. We've just spent ages with a load of architects and a planning department getting the." I said, within 3 weeks, we'd put in an offer and had the offer accepted. So there would be no markers in our behaviour that would suggest that we were in market.
Yeah.
So there is, to a degree, that draws you towards treating.
Because it's emotional.
Yeah, because there is a big emotional play. But the reality is also that that is assuming that Rightmove is just a place where you go and find a property, whereas actually what we're thinking about is a lot more. So we want to play into a much bigger property ecosystem. So yes, it's about finding the house, but is that a house to buy? Is that a house to rent? What sort of size, scale, whereabouts? There's also, look, we want you to help you not just to find, but to work out what you can afford, to work out how you get through that process of transaction, and we give you the tools to do that. So we need to understand, I guess, the probability that you are going to want to interact with those things. So it isn't as precise as, so in previous life at Just Eat, our world of sort of transactional and attitudinal segmentations and how we put them together, there was not a predictability, but it was a structure and a framework that you could apply with a pretty strong degree of confidence that it would help you to decision make and move people through that segmentation. For us, it plays a slightly different role because there is people move in and out of groups with reasonable frequency. Because if you think about purchase frequency at Just Eat, I think the average frequency, I'm sure it's changed now, but it was once a month across the board. On average, people move house once every 8 years. So that's a pretty long purchase cycle. So you've got to understand that people will dip in and out of different sort of intent groups and different groups. But we will use segmentation to try to understand, once people are establishing themselves in certain behaviours, how do we make sure that the products and the services that we offer are complementary to where they find themselves. So I would say it's a slightly different application of segmentation than you would use in an e-com business, for example.
If I remember the last time you were with us, and by the way, if I'm wrong, we'll edit it out. I remember an anecdote you said when you were at Just Eat, which was in and around how your advertising, and particularly I believe I remember your TV advertising, had a significant impact on weekly performance and ongoing performance. And there was an anecdote where there was a time when for some reason you switched off a load of advertising only to actually impact the weekly sales figures and trading figures far higher than you anticipated in the first place.
Yeah, I think, and we'll have to go. We'll have to go back over the podcast to remember that. But it was during COVID, and so we were in a place where, not to dig through the annals of COVID, but where our demand was vastly outstripping our supply. So if you remember, we were all sitting at home. We had nothing to do. We were allowed to go for, I think it was a half an hour walk a day, something like that. And our only solace was food, wine, and Netflix, basically, not necessarily in that order. And so that meant huge amounts of demand. But also, if you think back, we were in a world of social distancing, so it's quite hard to operate a kitchen at that point. So quite a lot of restaurants were closing or restructuring or thinking about different ways of running their businesses. So we had this strange moment where we had to try to reduce demand because what we were ending up doing was producing suboptimal consumer experiences because it was taking hours and hours and hours for food, or the restaurant couldn't service the order, so on and so forth. So we didn't run our campaign, and at the time that was the launch of the Snoop Dogg campaign. And some of it was data, but some of it was absolutely gut as well, which was at some point or another we've got to see that equilibrium return of supply to service the demand. And so we did that, but we absolutely could very clearly draw the line between marketing activity, specifically brand activity, and then what that translated to in terms of orders as well. So, and that was, as I say, some of that was media and econometric and MMM modelling and everything that came with that. Some of that was a bit of instinct and a bit of sort of gut feel as well.
I mean, it's fascinating because what it plays to is the age-old debate, brand and performance, and how almost wrongly brand equals long, performance equals short, when what you've just described there is in fact brand advertising influencing short-term outcomes in that sense. And I think when I look at the sense of Rightmove, I wonder if, and of course you've moved significantly on from being the tele and email guys, but certainly, brand advertising still sits at the heart of what you do. Yeah. And do you see similar trends in relation to sort of brand advertising translating into even short-term output across your channels?
We see that when we focus our communications on particular outcomes. So our traffic base is very, very big. It's millions and millions of people a day.
Yeah.
So whatever you're doing, it is quite hard to material impact that unless you're going to spend an enormous amount of money, which we don't. So actually what we can see is the impact on some of our, I guess, lower trafficked areas or some of our more transactional areas. So I give an example of mortgages and our ability. We have the opportunity, you can get a mortgage in principle, digital mortgage in principle in 5 minutes online. And so we talk about that with certain segments and certain audiences, and we might use creators, we might use social video, we might use different modes to get there. We're not using performance in that particular instance. We're using brand, and what we can see is significant uplifts in use. I think the really positive thing, actually, significant uplift in usage, but also connection to our brand. So the idea that we are a platform that offers these services because this is part of our strategic journey, is actually saying we do more than search, we play a bigger role. So the lovely thing is kind of the duality of the fact that it drives people to use the tools, but also it creates that sort of longer term connection between our platform and those services as well.
Love it.
So Matt, time has whizzed by. Time for the last question. Goodness me, they will get kicked out soon. This has been a masterclass in how a strategic marketer really thinks deeply about things. And you've achieved a lot. So my question is a bit of a crystal baller in terms of how you're thinking about your future career.
It's an interesting question, and I think there's still a lot to do at Rightmove, and it's a place where, as I've sort of talked about already, we're kind of getting going in terms of the role that we can play in the business. But I think for me, that's the bit that really excites me. That's the bit that really interests me, is how do you build and grow businesses? And I've worked in startups, scale-ups, spent the last 10 years in PLCs, but it always comes back to how do you grow something? And I think marketing is so well placed to do that. And actually I think it can do that in the hands of almost in a broader role, if you like. And that's, I think, the really interesting thing. If you look, all of us are pretty familiar with the fact that a huge amount more CEOs are former CFOs than CMOs. That is not new news to anybody. Nobody's taking that as an original insight. But there are examples, and I work for Peter Duffy, who's now CEO at Money Supermarket, and you can see the value that a marketer can deliver in a broader, more commercial role. So whether for me that continues to be growth that I deliver in a CMO role, whether it becomes whatever the collection of letters in front of the job title are, I think leaning into that and thinking about actually how you build businesses and how you sort of connect with what consumers need and how that sort of drives outcomes, that's the bit that I find really exciting.
Super. Well, I mean, we might well have a third. It's been brilliant. As I said, like a real masterclass from a strategic marketer. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been great fun.
Thank you, Matt.